or because you've heard my work, and then some people aren't really familiar with what I do, and that's fine. It's just like a different parameter. But interestingly, I've actually had some projects where music hasn't passed those first couple of hurdles, but then their teams were just so adamant. They're like, nope, you're the person. Trust me, this artist is amazing. Their work so far doesn't represent what they could do. They're trying to make a change. And so if there's someone on the team who has an intuition, then that's often a good sign as well. So I've actually, I won't name any names because I don't want to, say I wasn't into this record to start with or didn't hear anything, but then you wind up actually working together and you're like, oh my God, this is like brilliant. And we're doing something totally different that's bringing out a completely different side of this artist that I wasn't hearing in any of that other stuff.
Right.
And
we're not all Bjork, right? We don't all,
Well, yeah. But I mean, it's interesting. Like I really, after, in a way, my whole phase through the UK was I was largely getting pulled into established teams and to work with established artists after they had already got big. Which is like an ultimate first world problem, right? And I was like, started to feel like I want to actually help people break. Like I still don't feel like I've broken an artist. Do you know what I mean? I've helped artists make new records that have been successful, but I haven't like met someone on like a Bjork or Prodigy level before they've had any records out and then accompanied them on the whole journey.
Right. That seems to be the catapulting move if you want to jumpstart your career in this industry, which I don't know if it's honestly the right move. Like sometimes slow and steady is the right move, but they say like, if you want to jumpstart it, find a budding artist that's going to just explode and just work with them.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, it's an imprecise science. I've worked with a huge amount of new artists that I thought were absolutely brilliant and deserved to hugely blow up. And, some of them, like there's an Australian artist called Odette who I loved to pieces, who I think is one of the most phenomenal talents I've worked with in my career. And she's doing great in Oz, but hasn't crossed over globally or anything like that. But the flip side of all this is I actually really like working with new artists a lot now because they can just focus on the music so much more. It's really exciting working with a huge artist towards the end of a project. But like, when I was working on the Killers record, had a great time with them. So this is just, it's a fact. And it's a very exciting time. But basically, you wouldn't get any mixed feedback for 2 weeks and find out, oh, it's because I've been on a video shoot with Werner Herzog and they're setting up all this other stuff, So there's just so much complexity around their whole career that, the amount of dedicated focus that they can have on the music is less. Flip side is that can be really cool on the adventure side, and that was what was interesting with Bjork. I think she balanced those two things really well. And actually that process of working with her from like, okay, we're gonna, on Biophilia, she just rented a house on the beach in Puerto Rico for 7 months and we're just locked away down there. But then towards the end of the record, it's like she's going for meetings with Apple, she's going for meetings with like 3D people, the app developers are coming in, the stage designer people are coming in, and at least with her, because it's much more like it's such a, she's an independent artist, basically. And her label in the UK, One Little Indian, like Derek and her have been working together since she was a teenager. So it's really like a family operation. So that was actually really fun because I got to be, to some degree, involved in some of that as well. So you kind of feel like you're helping bring this whole thing to life as opposed to just like, no replies to your emails for weeks.
She sounds like she has like a crazy work ethic when it comes to the actual music making part of the process.
Yeah, totally.
Which I know a lot of established artists at a certain point kind of take a backseat and let other people kind of take care of a lot of that stuff for them.
Yeah, but that's also just what's cool about the way that her and her team run stuff is like everyone, and it's I think a little bit of like the Icelandic way, which is, in Iceland everyone does everything. You know what I mean? So I had never been a musical director for a band before. I had played in orchestras and stuff when I was a kid, but at the end of Volta, she was like, oh, do you want to come on tour? You can be my musical director and do like electronics. And I was like, what? But I did, and I did a great job, and it was awesome. You know what I mean? So she really has no problem just understanding that like we're all talents and you can apply your talents in different directions. So that was, really just amazing to do all that with her.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it before, like how you were originally shitting your pants and then eventually she kind of had this aura that kind of,
the second she walked in the room, perfectly at ease.
Yeah,
you know?
and so I feel like personally I've done a little bit of touring with an artist named Alex Clare, and I sometimes feel like I'm out of my element, as like how am I touring as a bass player here? Like I'm spending most of my days in the studio and I have a bit of imposter syndrome. So it's like, but like obviously he trusts me to be there with him.
Yeah.
It's like I guess you just had this like feeling of, I don't know, equanimity or whatever when she chose you to do that. You were able to kind of like ease into that role.
It's important for people to understand as well that you're never really truly prepared for anything. And even if I'm working with like a completely new artist, I'm often shitting myself when we start. Do you know what I mean? It's like
I love the honesty.
It's true. It's and you gotta get used to this feeling of being uncomfortable and not in your element, because if you stay in your comfort zone, nothing's gonna change.
Right.
So yeah, looking for that, almost like that's on the other side of like stress or anxiety is excitement, and just learning to kind of embrace that, and learning to, you kind of have to be vulnerable as well, right? Like we've all been teased as kids or whatever, or you've made something and someone said it's shit. So you just getting used to like, here's something, what do you think? And this is where it gets into like a really big hack, and really my style of communicating with my artists is I just try to get stuff to a dialogue as quickly as possible. So that it doesn't matter where an idea comes from. I always want to like ask my artists as many questions as possible and trust that they will inspire me, and that by the fact that I'm interested in what they think, they'll feel happy about going like, that's cool, but can we try this? And then, you know what I mean? Just like kickstarting like a really positive spiral instead of trying to be like, act like an authority, like I'm the boss that knows what this is supposed to sound like because I've had all this experience. And, I hear, I think that's a really just counterproductive attitude. I'm always shocked when I hear stories about people who work that way, kind of my way or the highway producers. Some are very famous for it and are happily famous for it. But
I don't think that would ever work for me.
Yeah.
I always want to bring the artist in and just, I don't know, it's their song, right? Like,
right? Yeah.
I've never been the guy that's like, okay, this is what we're going to do with your record.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, I'm working with a teenager now, and it's like, okay, like she's basically giving me like carte blanche, like do whatever you want to do when you're like recording, not exactly obviously because she has feedback, but like, I'm like, so this is cool, right? Like I'm just going to do this. And she's like, okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, cool. You want to say something else? But again, she's just a teenager,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, I'm like waiting for that feedback and, the artist's input. Cause like, that's just such a part of how I think about music, like, you said, it's a service. We're in service of the music that we're given. Right. So I really view it that way as well. It's like, I'm trying to give them their song,
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, if there's anyone who's listening to this who is an artist, who's more like, coming up from the other side of being an artist, collaborating with personnel, then really like just developing that skill of communicating your vision becomes really huge. And even like I was mentioning, like putting your team at ease, you know what I mean? Actually creating an environment with the people that you work with where they feel welcome and where they really, the ultimate hack if you're an artist is to inspire your team to bring their A game to the table. And that's it's a little bit mystical mojo. But again, this is where if you can get any creative pursuit, if it's not like who's right or wrong, but like it's almost like that, what is it? The improv comedy, like yes and.
Yes,
what about this? Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Okay, and that. And then it's, then
right.
You really truly understand no idea comes from one person in particular, and it's the way all these things mix together. Going back to what we were saying earlier, when you have like these two different things that kind of combine and make something interesting as a result.
Yeah. Wow, I love it. So emerging artists is kind of your jam these days, in terms of like.
I mean, I work with lots of people. I just did a record for Bombay Stereo who are on like Sony Latin, but I like it all. Yeah. I mean, really, this is kind of where I was saying, like, I served an apprenticeship under Bjork. It was learning to have an adventure making a record. So, that's kind of,
I love it.
Yeah, that can be an adventure sitting on my own in my studio if I'm mixing remotely, which I do a lot of. Like the Bombay Stereo record I did remotely all through the pandemic. I was doing additional production and mixing. But the actual like emotional and sonic journey and communicating with them was amazing. Like they're in Colombia. Simon from the band was like really generous in terms of like going, okay, the way that these drums and these shakers work, it's like comes from this particular style of folk music here. and we need this balance to work a certain way, or he'd send me videos about like, here's someone performing this in the street, but then the whole thing is like built on like, you know, banging kick drums and synths. So, you know, those journeys are amazing. Incidentally, just while we're talking about great records, I want to say thank you to Lido Pimienta, who's a Colombian-Canadian artist, and encourage your listeners to check out her record, Miss Colombia, which got a Grammy nomination last year. I was not involved in it at all, but she linked me up with them. She recommended me for the job. And that really actually opened me up to like, you know, everything that's happening in Latin America. Well, I haven't heard everything, but just opened me up to like all the crazy stuff that's happening down there, crazy in a good way.
Right.
So
there's so many places that, like, we were talking about like 7.5 billion people on Earth. There's just infinite worlds happening that we just can't even possibly be aware of to potentially explore.
Yeah, my daughter's obsessed with K-pop as well, so we literally sit down every week and like go through the new releases and analyze them. And you know,
wow.
Last time Stray Kids album came out, we went through it track by track, or like, you know, I don't think this one's really working, but I think I can see what they're going for. But you know, why did they fill us up with so much stuff? So we do these full-on record analysis sessions.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, is your daughter a budding producer?
She's just ridiculously into music, which I love. So you know,
amazing.
We'll see where she goes with it. She's a creative soul. She's just, you know, one of those interesting characters where you can't persuade them to do anything, but the second they get into it, like, you'll never stop them. So she started playing guitar like a year and a half ago, after basically resisting any kind of attempt of, you know, formal music lessons or anything like that. She just wanted to play guitar and, like, you know, went for it. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happened with me, is like my parents were like, yeah, we're going to play piano. And then obviously I was never super into it. And then once I decided I'm playing bass, it was, you know, full hog, you know.
Absolutely.
So that's the way to, that means, it's, maybe she'll be a lifer.
Oh, I mean, but that's, if, you know, you're asking me about like, what was it like in New Zealand? There's something you said where you're like, you know, I was alone doing it. And I think the difference though is, this is a big distinction for people to make. It was pre-internet. So I couldn't look up any kind of information at all about stuff online. And I knew that a 4-track existed, but I didn't even know that like an audio engineer existed yet. And so it was literally at like a school careers day that someone asked about audio engineering, and I found out like, oh, there is a audio engineering college in New Zealand. But the point is then it was like, you know, human relationships and stuff like that were really important. And, you know, making stuff with the people around you, sharing ideas with the people around you, and then also like just keeping your ear to the ground. Like I wound up actually being able to go and hang out in a studio because I was in a pro audio store and just overheard the owner talking to a customer about their studio. So I just like asked him like, hey, can I work in your studio? And the guy linked me up with the local engineer who let me hang out on some of his sessions or whatever. So, you know, this is where the paths are kind of a little bit murky, but just kind of being in the game is important.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I would say I had like a similar experience with my beginning of getting into production, because I kind of started producing when I moved to Israel here, and for the first time, I didn't have anybody to jam with. So it's like musician Ben kind of transitioned in that moment into, you know, production interested Ben, and but now my challenge is, I mean, maybe I'm overcoming it now already, especially through this podcast. It's just like interacting with other people, because you kind of go into this man or woman cave when you're just starting out and you're just so hyper focused on, you know, your DAW and whatever you're working on, and like the outside world is everything, you know. In the end, and like, you know, I think it's important to. It's an ongoing process of just opening up and collaborating, you know, with other people. Yeah,
it's wild. And, you know, when I built my studio in Montreal, you know, there's one point where I had 6 months without anyone coming in the door. And you can drive yourself a bit crazy. It's fun because, you know, like I'm a well-adjusted introvert. Like I'm pretty good at meeting people and chatting. I've developed that skill, but I really need like my me time.
I would say I relate to that.
Yeah, I'm sure most of us probably working on like this side of the business have some degree of that going on. But you know, sometimes you're sitting there, you're going, oh, I need to buy more gear. I need to do this. This isn't working. That, and then someone comes into your studio and you do a collaboration. You do something insane in like one day, and you're like, what the fuck? I had no idea. You know, or just like seeing your own methodologies getting shaken up, or seeing someone go, no, let's plug this in over there. And it's like, well, I don't use it that way. Or you might be thinking that internally. You're like, fine. And then you're like, oh my God, learn so much stuff. So yeah, just having things shaken
resistant to change, but then seeing that the change is necessary. That kind of like personality type. Yeah. I want to touch on, you know, gender inclusivity, because you mentioned that's like a pillar of the complete producer network. And It's something that I think is super important. And I mean, I think on the one hand, it is changing because of the accessibility of the technology, and I think there's that that old